Are you ready to enter the world of real horror? If you dare to face the darkness and live in the heart of excitement, you have come to the right place. The #1 horror channel that makes your heart beat faster. Can you stand real horror scenes? Join us now to discover what will keep you awake all night long. Don't miss the scary moments. Subscribe now and ring the bell to receive all the new.
It was a dark and desolate night, with the wind howling fiercely through the dry trees, and shadows dancing on the walls as if they were ghosts accustomed to lingering in this place. On that night, David sat in his small room, absorbed in reading a book about ancient myths. The book spoke of laughing demons, dark creatures that feed on fear and sneak into their victims' minds to plant terror in their hearts. David did not know that merely reading this book would change his life forever. As he flipped through the ancient pages, he suddenly felt an unnatural chill sweep through the room. He tried to turn on the lamp beside him, but it didn't work. At that moment, he heard a faint laugh filling the room. The sound didn't come from any specific place but echoed from every corner, as if it emanated from the very walls of the room. David's heart raced as he tried to convince himself that what was happening was just an illusion, but he quickly realized that the sound was growing louder and clearer. The shadows on the walls began to gather and form laughing faces, their eyes gleaming with malice. David tried to escape, but he found the door to the room tightly shut. The shadows began to move towards him slowly, their smiles widening in a horrifying manner. He felt trapped, his end drawing near. Suddenly, one of the shadows materialized into a dark entity with glowing red eyes. The entity approached David and whispered in his ear with a voice filled with malice. "You are ours now. We will feed on your fear until the end." David felt his mind collapsing under the weight of fear, and he began to scream madly. But his screams were heard only by the laughing demons, who continued to relish his terror. With each laugh, he felt his soul being slowly torn from him. Then the terrifying events began to unfold. David started seeing horrific visions in every corner of the room. He saw ghosts with torn limbs, children with empty eyes staring at him unceasingly, and screams coming from nowhere. The more he tried to close his eyes, the clearer and more brutal the images became. In one moment, his closet door burst open, and skeletal hands emerged, grabbing his neck. He felt an icy chill creeping into his bones, as if life was being slowly drained from him. He tried to break free, but their grip was as strong as steel. As he struggled, the laughing demons drew closer, laughing loudly and terrifyingly. The creatures began to take on more solid forms, and as they approached him, the details of their grotesque faces became clearer. Their faces were unnaturally deformed, with wide smiles filled with knife-like teeth. The demons whispered incomprehensible words, as if cursing his soul for eternity. As David struggled against the skeletal grips, the atmosphere suddenly shifted to a terrifying stillness. The ground beneath him began to tremble, and deep cracks appeared in the floor, from which thick black smoke and a suffocating smell of sulfur emerged. From the cracks, dark entities with distorted bodies and reptilian features, resembling snakes but with human eyes, began to rise. The entities began to crawl towards David with astonishing speed, whispering his name in a hissing tone. David felt his feet freezing in place, unable to move. He looked down at the ground beneath him, where distorted faces emerged from the cracks, screaming and pleading for help. Then, in a terrifying moment, a bony hand separated from the broken floor and grabbed David's leg, pulling him downward. He tried to grasp anything around him, but the furniture began to vanish like smoke. He felt his body being pulled by an irresistible force into a dark, endless abyss. David's screams echoed through the room as he sank into the darkness, his eyes gleaming with indescribable terror. He saw the laughing demons swirling around him, and as he descended further, he felt their fangs sinking into his soul, draining every part of his fear and horror. As he sank into the darkness, new horrifying visions began to appear. He saw himself bound to an old, rusted operating table, surrounded by laughing demons dressed in blood-stained lab coats. Surgical instruments floated around him, their blades gleaming ominously as they drew nearer. The tools began to slowly pierce his body, and he felt unbearable pain. The demons relished his screams, laughing louder as his agony increased. They cut pieces of his body, then reattached them in distorted ways, as if playing with him like a broken doll. Then, in the midst of this torment, David noticed that the room began to change illogically. The walls started to expand and contract unnaturally, as if they were breathing. He began to feel that the room itself was becoming a living entity, exuding evil and horror. The furniture in the room started to move on its own, transforming into living creatures that roamed around him, emitting terrifying creaks and roars. Then the creatures that emerged from the cracks in the floor began to gather around him, urging the demons to inflict more pain. The room became crowded with dark entities that whispered terror into his ear, manipulating his mind and filling him with hallucinations. They laughed louder, as if they were enjoying witnessing his complete breakdown. David felt his mind collapsing under the weight of this endless torment, and the more he tried to escape, the more the creatures manifested in increasingly terrifying forms. He had visions of his family members watching his suffering, unable to help him, their faces showing expressions of sorrow and despair. Then, in a horrific and bloody moment, one of the walls exploded, unleashing a torrent of blood. The blood flooded the room, covering the floor and walls. With each wave of blood, new ghosts appeared, all laughing and singing songs of death. David was drowning in a sea of blood and ghosts, desperately trying to swim to safety but to no avail. Each time he attempted to reach the surface, a torn, bony hand would drag him back down into the depths. The air was filled with screams of pain and terror that mirrored his own psychological torment. In the final moment, when David could no longer endure, the laughing demons surrounded him and enclosed him in a circle of fire. The room became a blazing inferno, the flames consuming everything. As the fire devoured his body, the sound of the demonic laughter never ceased. When morning came, the neighbors found David's door open and the room completely empty. There was no trace of him, except for the book of legends that lay open to the page about the laughing demons. The words in the book were shifting and morphing unnaturally, as if recounting a new story of David's torment and beckoning other victims to succumb to the same fate. From that day on, David was never seen again. However, on some nights, the neighbors could hear mysterious laughter echoing throughout the house, as if the laughing demons still lingered, searching for a new victim to feed on their fear. Some even claimed to see David's image in broken mirrors, suffering the same torment he endured.